The meeting room fell silent the moment I walked in. My heels clicked across the polished floor, echoing louder than the whispers behind their smirks. My boss, Darren, sat at the head of the table, leaning back in his leather chair like a king watching the jester stumble. But this time, I was not the jester. He had demoted me after I returned from maternity leave, stripped me of everything I had worked for, humiliated me in front of the very team I once led. And now, as he opened his mouth to announce a major investor presentation, the doors swung wide again. The new consultants had arrived, and I was one of them. Darren's eyes widened as he scanned the faces. Then he saw mine. I smiled, calm and composed, and took the chair across from him, as if it had always belonged to me. "You will be reporting to me this quarter," I said evenly, laying down the portfolio. "Let's begin." He blinked, his jaw twitching, but I did not give him time to interrupt. The presentation was mine. The investors were mine. And soon, the company's future would be too. Because when Darren took everything from me, he never expected I would come back with more power than he could handle. And it all started the moment he called my maternity leave a vacation. That was the day I knew I would make him regret every smug word. I used to believe that hard work and loyalty were enough to earn respect in the workplace. That was before Darren, my boss of 5 years, decided to punish me for becoming a mother. When I returned from maternity leave, he acted like I was a burden instead of a contributor. He demoted me publicly, handed my responsibilities to a younger man with half my experience, and reduced my role to meaningless busywork. My name is Marissa Hale. I was 34 years old when I walked back into that office after giving birth to my son. I had built my reputation brick by brick in that firm. And in one meeting, Darren tore it down all because I dared to step away for a few months to care for my newborn. He underestimated me. He thought I would crumble. But what he did not know was that I had a plan. And it started with walking away. Quietly. Purposefully. Ready to come back with fire. Before everything unraveled, I was the senior strategy analyst at a respected mid-sized investment firm based in Denver. I was not just another cog in the machine. I was the one who kept it turning smoothly. My work built client trust. My forecasts helped secure deals. My pitches turned hesitant investors into firm believers. I was there long before Darren took over as CEO. In those early years, our office had a strong culture of merit and respect. We worked hard, stayed late, and supported each other. When Darren was promoted from VP to CEO, I was cautiously optimistic. He was charming and eloquent, though sometimes that charm veiled arrogance. At first, he seemed to value results. He took credit for many of mine, of course, but I chalked that up to hierarchy. What mattered was that the firm was growing, and so was my influence in it. I met my husband around that time. We married 2 years later, and I finally felt I could allow myself something I had quietly longed for, a family. I did not expect Darren to personally congratulate me when I announced my pregnancy, but I did expect a degree of professionalism. Instead, he barely looked up from his phone and said, "That's going to be a long time away from the floor." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. He was not. During my pregnancy, I trained a junior analyst to cover the basics in my absence. I wrote detailed transition documents, scheduled check-ins for after my return, and left everything in perfect order. Still, Darren avoided conversations about my maternity leave. Anytime I brought up planning or timelines, he brushed it off. "We'll figure it out when we get there," he said more than once. My maternity leave lasted 16 weeks, the full amount HR allowed. I stayed connected with my team, sending notes here and there, checking on major projects, but I respected the time I had earned. When I returned, I was rested, grateful, and excited to be back. But something had changed. Darren stopped acknowledging me in meetings. My office had been reassigned. My emails went unanswered. And worst of all, my largest client, the one I had brought in and nurtured, was no longer under my portfolio. I asked for a meeting with Darren. He agreed, but kept it under 10 minutes. "Marissa," he said, "while you were out, we had to make fast decisions. You know how it is. Adaptability is key. Your role has shifted. You'll be helping Marcus now with internal reporting." Marcus was the analyst I had trained before I left. Fresh out of grad school, ambitious, but still learning the ropes. And now I was reporting to him. I remember walking out of that meeting feeling as if I had left some essential part of myself in that office. My hands were trembling. My ears rang. It was not just the demotion, it was the message behind it. In Darren's eyes, motherhood had made me obsolete. My coworkers, most of whom had celebrated my baby shower, were now distant. Whispers followed me into the break room. The words, "not as committed anymore," lingered in the air. I had become invisible. And Darren, ever charismatic, made it seem like business as usual. For 2 weeks, I went through the motions. But each click of my keyboard felt heavier. Each spreadsheet I filled for Marcus felt like a reminder of what I had lost. Until one afternoon, as I sat in the cubicle they had reassigned to me, a far cry from my former glass office, I realized something. They thought I was gone. That I would fade away. That I would quietly accept their reshuffling of my worth. They were wrong. Because while Darren thrived on showmanship, I thrived on strategy. And I still had access to the one thing he could not charm, manipulate, or promote away: knowledge. I knew the clients. I knew the systems. I knew what they valued and what Darren was hiding from them. And most importantly, I still had their trust. It was time to put that trust to good use. I was going to build something of my own and take the very people he relied on with me. Not with noise, not with threats, but with purpose and quiet precision. Because Darren had taught me one important thing: the only thing more powerful than revenge is letting them walk into it thinking they have already won. It was late October when the final piece snapped into place. I was sitting in the break room, half listening to Marcus stumble through a Zoom call with a key investor, one I had personally courted and retained for over 4 years. He was mispronouncing their name, fumbling their investment figures, and mixing up their portfolio assets. I sat frozen, coffee in hand, as I watched that call turn from polite interest to frosty silence. That investor's eyes darted around, looking for anyone with authority, anyone they recognized. But they saw no one, because I had been erased. After the call, Marcus brushed past me in the hallway and said, "Hey, you should bring muffins or something next week. Morale's been weird since you came back." It hit me then. They had not just demoted me. They had turned me into a ghost. Something to be tolerated until I left on my own. Darren did not need to fire me. He just needed to make staying so humiliating that I would walk away voluntarily. That evening, I drove home in silence. My son, still under a year old, was asleep in the back seat. His tiny face, peaceful and unbothered by the cruelty of the world, reminded me why I had to fight back, not just for my career, but for the dignity they had tried to strip away. At home, I opened my laptop and began pulling together names. Clients I had worked with, investors who had asked for me by name, colleagues who had moved on and still trusted me. Slowly, methodically, I created a list. I did not reach out yet. I needed to be careful, strategic. A week later, Darren called a company-wide meeting. He strutted onto the stage with his signature grin, flashing a PowerPoint behind him filled with vague goals and empty enthusiasm. "We are expanding," he declared. "New tech partnerships, fresh investor targets, and internal restructuring to stay agile." Restructuring. That word again. After the presentation, he called a handful of us into a private conference room. I sat stiffly in the corner as he laid out his vision. More cuts. More outsourcing. A new round of hires from his personal network, mostly yes men from his old business school cohort. "You'll be training them, Marissa," he said, not even looking at me. "You've got institutional memory. Might as well pass it on." That was the moment. He did not realize what he had just handed me: access. Access to new hires, to internal systems, to timelines. I smiled politely, nodded, and walked out of that room with the first flicker of fire in weeks. Over the next month, I played the game. I trained his new recruits with precision, all the while making mental notes of where the holes were. I copied emails to my personal drive. I printed spreadsheets of performance reviews, noting inconsistencies. I logged everything Darren overlooked, and there was plenty. He had been charming investors with inflated numbers and vague promises, but he had stopped delivering results. He had leaned so hard on my previous work that he forgot how to generate his own. Meanwhile, I contacted a lawyer. Quietly, discreetly. I needed to understand what I could take with me, what I could build on my own without crossing legal boundaries. The answer? Quite a lot. What Darren never understood was that loyalty, not paperwork, built an empire. Then came the final straw. One Friday morning, I arrived at work to find my employee keycard deactivated. Security let me in manually, but the message was clear. Darren had removed me from the internal system. No warning, no notice. I checked my inbox, access denied. My desk cleared. I had been erased. That afternoon, I received an official letter stating I had been reassigned to a part-time advisory role with no direct clients, reduced pay, and no team. It was a demotion in everything but name. And yet, as I read that letter, I felt oddly calm. Because what Darren saw as a punishment, I saw as freedom. He thought he had locked me out. But in truth, he had released me. I had nothing left to lose. And everything to gain. Because while he spent his days rehearsing speeches and silencing dissent, I had been planting seeds. Now it was time to watch them bloom. My first call was to Henry, a private investor from Seattle who had always preferred direct, honest communication over Darren's flashy presentations. Years ago, I had sat across from him at a dim-lit steakhouse and explained our firm's long-term vision. He had been one of our earliest believers. When I called, he answered on the second ring. "I wondered when I'd hear from you," he said. "This place has gone downhill fast." That was all I needed to know. Henry was still on my side. And he was not the only one. Over the next few days, I reached out to a handful of people, not to pitch anything, just to catch up. I let them know what had happened, in calm and factual language. I did not rant. I did not badmouth Darren. I simply explained where I stood, what I was planning, and why I believed the time had come for something new. By the end of the week, 5 former clients had asked if they could be looped in when I launched something of my own. One even offered seed funding. I declined for now. I needed structure before money, vision before action. Then I called Joy. Joy had been our top financial analyst before Darren replaced her with someone from his fraternity circle. She had taken the blow with grace, but she had not forgotten. She was still watching the firm quietly from the sidelines, waiting for a reason to return. When I told her what I was building, she said, without hesitation, "Where do I sign?" Joy became my second set of eyes. Together, we compiled a list of potential team members. I reached out slowly, always through private emails or encrypted calls. I was not poaching, not officially. I was creating an exit ramp for people who were tired of Darren's arrogance and chaos. Every time someone said yes, my confidence grew. But I kept my head down. At Darren's firm, I still showed up for meetings, filed bland reports, and trained clueless recruits who repeated buzzwords like parrots. I smiled through it all. I was invisible, just as he had wanted. And that invisibility gave me power. Then, one morning, Darren walked in late and flustered. He had just lost a key investor, Henry. He slammed his door so hard that the blind shook. I watched from my desk, sipping coffee, while he barked into his phone for hours. He had no idea where the leak was coming from. But the truth was, there was no leak. There was just silence, his silence when he ignored people like me, Joy, and half the team who had kept the company afloat for years. His investors were not leaving because someone stole them. They were leaving because he stopped listening. And I was just getting started. A week after Henry pulled out, the cracks began to show. The Monday meeting started late because Darren could not find the updated projections. He accused a junior analyst of misfiling the data, though everyone knew it had been sitting in his inbox for days. The analyst quit by Friday. Two more investors quietly withdrew the following week, one citing leadership instability, the other simply saying they were reallocating resources. Darren tried to spin the losses as part of a strategic pivot, but no one was buying it. The air in the office was brittle. People spoke in whispers, eyes darting toward closed doors. The once busy coffee machine sat untouched. Meanwhile, I moved with deliberate calm. Joy, and I finalized the blueprint for our new firm. We called it Verdana Capital, a quiet nod to growth and clarity. The name came from a tree we used to walk past on our way to meetings, strong and elegant, but often overlooked. Just like us. Verdana was not a reaction. It was a return to intention. We built it around values Darren had abandoned long ago: transparency, trust, and respect for talent. Our mission statement was 2 lines long, and every line mattered. It felt real. It felt mine. We rented a tiny space on the top floor of a co-working hub, far from Darren's sleek offices. There was no marble, no receptionist. Just a whiteboard, 2 laptops, and a fire in our chests. By now, word had started to spread. Quietly, people reached out. "I heard you're starting something. Is there room for someone like me?" Even Darren's prized junior partner, Miles, a gifted strategist, came for coffee one evening. He looked over his shoulder before speaking. "I am tired of being asked to lie," he said. "If you'll have me, I am in." We had no marketing budget. But we had something Darren had lost completely: trust. Then came the email that made my heart stop. "Darren is calling an emergency investor meeting. Friday. Thought you should know." It was from an anonymous address, but I knew who had sent it. Darren was panicking. Investors wanted answers. They wanted to know where the money had gone, why projections were late, why key personnel were missing, why the man who once shook hands with pride now ducked out of meetings early and arrived late. I knew what was coming next. He would look for someone to blame. And the perfect scapegoat? The woman who had just returned from maternity leave. The woman he had already demoted. The woman no one had noticed quietly preparing her own stage. That woman was me. He would not see it coming until it was too late. And by then, I would not just have left. I would have taken what mattered most. 2 days before Darren's critical investor presentation, a thick envelope arrived by courier. Inside was a letter from the firm's legal department, pages of cold legalese accusing me of violating non-compete clauses, soliciting clients, and damaging the integrity of the organization. I read it with my baby asleep in my arms. This was Darren's strategy, not to confront his failings, but to silence me. His panic seeped through every paragraph. He had not expected me to survive, let alone challenge him. But I had done more than survive. I had rebuilt. With Joy's help, I prepared a firm but measured response. We included time-stamped documents, proof of a clean exit, and a clear record of our professional conduct. We did not escalate. We simply responded with truth. And then, silently, we launched Verdana Capital. There was no press conference. No public statement. Just a modest new website with a single line of text. "We believe in clarity, consistency, and the courage to build better." The response stunned us. Within hours, people were talking. A few clients Darren had long ignored reached out. One was a manufacturing firm he had dismissed for not being worth the hassle. Another had once expressed interest in working directly with me, and now she could. Darren must have seen it. Because the next morning, I got a text message. "What do you think you're doing?" No introduction. No punctuation. Just those 7 words. It was not a question. It was fear. He had finally realized the truth. I was not some woman returning from leave, quietly fading into the background. I was the one he should have watched more closely. The one he had dismissed and would now regret. I said nothing in response. His investor meeting happened behind closed doors that Thursday. I stayed home, sat with my daughter, and waited. By mid-afternoon, the whispers started. A friend inside the room texted me, then another. Darren had entered confidently, but the mask quickly cracked. His attempts to dazzle the room with future projections fell flat. When asked about the recent staff exits, he blamed personality clashes and immaturity. But then he slipped. He brought me up. By name. He accused me of orchestrating an exodus. It was a catastrophic error. Several people in that room already knew better. Over the past few weeks, I had quietly spoken to those who mattered, not to smear him, but to explain why we left and what we were building. Calmly. Honestly. The tide shifted in a matter of hours. Clients began to reach out. Some had grown tired of Darren's empty charm and shifting promises. Others had stayed with his firm out of loyalty, but that loyalty now had a better home. By the next morning, I had a message from one of his cornerstone investors. It was brief, direct, and clear. They wanted to speak with Verdana Capital. And they were not the only ones. In the days that followed, former colleagues contacted me. Clients offered referrals. Even 2 members of Darren's own executive team sent discreet messages expressing interest. He had started a war I never wanted. But I had built something stronger than revenge. I had built a future he could never be part of. And now, everything he tried to protect by pushing me out, his name, his image, his standing, was beginning to slip. And I had not even raised my voice. Not yet. It was not about shouting louder. It was about being heard by the right people. A week after Darren's disastrous investor meeting, Verdana Capital held its first official client forum. It was a modest gathering, 12 clients, all professionals who valued strategy over spectacle. We met in a glass-walled conference room downtown. No media, no fanfare, just careful planning, sincerity, and results. I stood in front of that room with my daughter asleep in her carrier beside me. My voice did not tremble. My palms stayed dry. I presented not only our investment approach, but our culture, how we listened, how we adapted, how we made space for voices often drowned out in louder rooms. They listened. One by one, those clients signed letters of intent before they left the building. That same evening, the first investor who had been on the fence confirmed they were moving their assets from Darren's firm to ours. Their statement was curt and to the point. We're choosing stability and transparency. The dominoes fell quickly. Darren's reputation had always been polished but brittle. When questioned, he turned defensive. When challenged, he retaliated. In an industry built on trust and judgment, he had neither anymore. And then came the moment I had quietly prepared for, the annual shareholders report. Weeks earlier, when I'd still been feeding a newborn at midnight and wondering how to move forward, I had remembered something. During my time at Darren's firm, I had contributed heavily to the portfolio design of several of our most profitable long-term projects. Darren had insisted I sign documentation listing him as the principal. I had, foolishly, in the name of partnership. But there was one project, one cornerstone, where I had kept my own name. A sustainable energy investment we had both initially dismissed, but that I pursued on my own initiative. I had filed the patents, navigated the legal frameworks, and set up the licensing agreement in my own name, under a shell trust. Darren had forgotten. Now his firm relied on it for nearly 30% of their projected earnings. And he did not own the rights. So I sent him a letter through my legal counsel. It was polite, precise. It informed him that, effective immediately, Verdana Capital would no longer license use of the proprietary model to his firm. The clause had always been there, he just never expected me to invoke it. The same day, we announced a partnership with a prominent green tech investor. The energy model would now be exclusive to us. His office sent a frantic response. Accusations. Threats. A desperate offer to renegotiate. I declined. For once, he had nothing to hide behind. No excuses. No distractions. Just the full weight of his own arrogance collapsing in on itself. And still, I said nothing publicly. There were no headlines. No scorched earth. But everyone in the room noticed when Darren failed to show up for the following investor summit. And everyone in our industry noticed when Verdana Capital's first-year performance outpaced every projection Darren had made in his last 5 years. The revenge was not fire or fury. It was consistency, integrity, and the quiet knowledge that I had won not because I tore him down, but because I had outgrown the world he tried to trap me in. When I walked past his old office one afternoon, a baby on my hip and documents in my briefcase, I did not smile or wave or glance up. I just walked on by. And that, in the end, was the part that stung him the most. It has been 3 years since I walked out of Darren's office with a newborn in my arms and nothing else to my name. Today, I walk into a boardroom I built from the ground up, surrounded by women and men who understand what it means to work, to raise families, to be underestimated, and to rise anyway. Verdana Capital is no longer a startup. It is a thriving boutique firm with a portfolio rooted in ethical growth, sustainability, and a company culture where parental leave is not a punishment, but a right. We sponsor scholarships for single mothers in finance. We mentor interns who never thought they belonged in this world. And most importantly, we listen. As for Darren, his firm was absorbed into a larger conglomerate after a long, slow decline. The deal was not favorable. He retained no executive role. The last I heard, he had moved to a different state, trying to start over in consulting. But the buzz he once enjoyed had dulled. Too many bridges burned. Too many truths revealed. I never spoke ill of him publicly. I never needed to. When people asked why I left, I simply said, I wanted a place that respected my mind as much as my time. And they understood. Motherhood changed me, not by limiting me, as Darren had assumed, but by sharpening me. When you survive sleepless nights and relentless self-doubt, you learn to focus on what matters. And you stop tolerating those who treat you as expendable. Was it revenge? Perhaps. But not in the way Darren imagined. He thought revenge was fury. I made it purpose. He thought he could demote me, strip me of worth, and move on untouched. Instead, I built something enduring, something he could never buy back. And I did it while holding my child close, through each setback and breakthrough. I built a future in the shadow of someone who tried to steal mine. And now, that shadow is gone. So to anyone watching who has been told you cannot lead because you are too young, too female, too tired, or too new, remember this. You do not have to scream to be powerful. You do not have to destroy others to rise. You just have to outlast the lie. And when the time comes, let your success speak for itself. Because in the end, is there any justice more satisfying than becoming the version of yourself they said you never could? What would you have done if someone tried to erase everything you worked for just because you became a mother?